Hi guys, Nomis here. Welcome back to Nomishavn for episode number 46. And this will be part 2 of building the port of Nomishavn, expanding out from where I built the cargo harbors in the last episode. I'll do a few different builds to fill out the port more in this episode. But the first thing you see me doing here is just building out a little more of the roads. And then I'll create what is the employee and visitor entrance of the port. Well, the entrance I built last episode will be strictly for trucks carrying cargo. This entrance will be for strictly private cars. So that means anyone who's going to the port and is parking their car somewhere inside the port on one of the many parking lots. What I'm building in this large open area here is a car import yard of the port. If you've been to a port or seen images of one, you've probably seen this before. Just endless rows of cars tightly stacked together. I'll go back and forth a bit of the design of this and how I do it in game. The lines are made with IMT here in the start ended up being way too wide, so I adjusted them later so the cars could be stacked as tightly together as possible. It's not like a parking lot where you need space between the cars for people to get in and out. Another issue is that I place a lot of cars using line tool. This absolutely decimated my prop limit, so I had to think differently. For prop cars, I used the tree and vehicle prop mods, which generate props of all of my vehicles, but I can't use these generated props in IMT or in Bob, because that leads to some problems, apparently. Therefore I removed the cars I placed manually and went to the workshop to find a few car props that I can use with IMT, and this worked a lot better. In the awkward spaces left around the import yard, I just fill with a few different warehouses and other industrial clutter. At the edge of the import yard, I had this idea to do something different. So what you see here is a few different train models Houston City, which has been imported and loaded onto a truck to be transported to their respective rail yards to use in the transport system. So before I start doing the next build, I just want to hop into Google Earth to look at some inspiration. Now we're back at the port of Antwerp in Belgium, which we've taken inspiration from before. But now I'm looking at a different place, and you can see this is like an oil industrial place. So I'm going to build something similar to this. You can see just like a bunch of oil tanks and this big network of different pipes. Yeah, pipes is the word. You see this big ones that is elevated above the road, and you have the small ones that's connecting to different tanks. And then you have, I'm not sure what this is, if it's some kind of processing plant maybe. I'll have that at least, some petroleum plant and other processing related to oil. And you have something cool here. You have these oil tankers, which seems to have some small docks which have the pipes leading in. So I guess that the oil tankers connect up to that somehow. And I'm gonna do something like that at the edge of the oil industry area. It won't look exactly the same, but I'm taking some ideas from this. And then you also have just straight on the side of the dock here as well. And you always have the pipes that's connecting up to it. And you have the smaller, I guess it's some kind of storage or processing. I'm not sure. And you just see it's this big intricate network and chimneys, and yeah. So I'll just go back into game and turn up the music, and you can just see me building this, or something inspired by this, with my own idea of how it's gonna look. And then I'll be back commentating on the next build of the episode. wanted to have some oil rigs in the horizon to make it look like Nomishavn has an offshore oil industry. And to do this I got the sub-building from the offshore oil rig, so I could place only the building in water and put it right at the edge of the map. Moving on, I want to do a little detailing of the train tracks running above the port. So I use this bridge prop and adjust the terrain to be smoother and get some nature detailing in there to blend it together more. Before I continue building in the port area, I'm gonna do a little project outside it. And that is extending an elevated metro line along the main road stretching along the outside of the port. It will be extended from one of the lines crossing the river, coming from the central station over in Christiania. The lore behind why there's a metro line here is that this was built a long time ago as a small local freight line to move goods from the port into the more central parts of the city. Once cars started coming into Nomishavn, they were seen as much more flexible for local transport around the city of freight coming into the port. The highways in the city were built mainly for trucks to move faster around the city, and the freight line slowly started becoming obsolete. In the 70s it was decided to turn this freight line into a metro line, and it was connected into a line running through Christiania and onwards from there. The elevated line with its brick structures was an important historical part of this area, and it was decided to keep this and refurbish it, while building the stations in a style which celebrated this aesthetic. Using IMT I lined the tracks with some nice looking brick walls as support, and used some fitting brick wall props as the main part when decorating the station. The station will look a little unfinished with no roof or shelter, but that is because there was an extension above the station added later on, which I will build later in the video, and I'll talk more about it then. Under the arch of the entrance of this elevated station, I placed down an underground entrance, which will lead to an underground station of another line running through here and make for a smooth connection. The underground line will come in from Rosengård, but I'll get to that later and talk a little bit about it.
These babies take me higher.
I noticed some bike paths near the port when looking at Google Earth, so I figured it would be cool to have a bike path following along the right of way of the metro line here. When I get to the roundabout, I need to elevate it to cross above it. Looking back, I realize I should have probably found a way for pedestrians to cross past the roundabout as well. But I can look at that another time, and probably extend the bike path even more as well. Getting back to the metro lines, here I'm building out the underground tracks for the underground part of the port station. It's a bit complex as it passes underwater and also a big undeveloped island, and I need to make plenty of adjustments to make sure it's below the bottom of the water while still having a gradient that the metro can handle. The way I build it now will open up for a metro station on this island in the middle here if I choose to build something there in the future. Getting back to the port area, I'll start laying out a road network for what will be the cruise terminal. If you have followed the series for a while, you might remember I already put down a harbour for cruise ships back in Björgvin, but this is kind of in a bad place. There's nowhere to expand for more than one ship to dock at a time, and it's also very close to historical areas, which isn't great with these large polluting ships. Lastly, the old cruise terminal had pretty bad transit connections. I imagine this cruise terminal was built together with a big modernization of the whole port area in the 1980s, taking use of a lot of closed down factories which sat here before and was demolished in the process. I haven't chosen one specific cruise terminal to take inspiration from, rather a few details from a bunch of different ones around Europe. I used an asset from the workshop modeled after the cruise terminal in Stockholm, as I think it is the best one on the workshop, and it also has these walkways that connects the cruise ships directly to the terminal building. You'll probably recognize them when you see them in the video. To start with, I'm setting up these areas where cars can drive onto a cruise ship. I'm not sure what they're called. I'm making a gap in the quays which I cover up with the dock asset, and later on I'll add a metal surface which is kind of a ramp that the cars get onto as they drive onto the ship. And then I'll also add a few blank passenger harbours and hide them to make sure that ships will come in with tourists there to make it functional. Inside the car deck of this ship asset, I'm drawing some elevated invisible roads so that cars can enter and exit. Then to make people park cars here, I hide some raceable parking spots inside. In the space leading up to the car deck, I'm building out the car lanes, both for exiting and entering. Something I've also seen on cruise terminals are these numbered lanes where cars wait to board. I line up a bunch of plain pavement roads and draw lines with IMT, while I put down some number decals. So these are the walkways I talked about, which connects the parked cruise ships to the terminal building. What I'm doing is making a network of them and placing 2 entrance walkways everywhere that the ships will park. Another detail I wanted to add was some bus bays for any bus lines which runs into the port. I don't have any bus lines planned for the port at the moment, so for now this is purely for decoration. Just some curbs for people to wait on and some shelters and all of that. But maybe I will add some bus lines later on, when the rest of this island is developed. For now it will only be rail transit, which is functional by the port. I often see some pretty nicely decorated parking lots with planters and all that by cruise ports, so I'm building out some of these in the areas which makes sense. parked cruise ships, I'm finalizing the detailing by adding some mooring lines, both on the front and the back of the ship. The port area was looking a little empty, so I filled some of the space with parked bikes and some clusters of forklifts and crates, which I imagine is cargo that is being loaded onto the cruise ships. And now coming on to some of the coolest parts of this build, and that is the monorail. In fact, the first monorail I built. This monorail is a shuttle line which will take cruise ship passengers directly to the metro station outside the port. The station will be built directly on top of the terminal building, as you can see here. And when you watch me build it, I want to touch on some of the lore behind this line. Port of Nomishavn monorail shuttle, as it's called, was built in the 1980s, together with a new cruise terminal. As it was decided by the government, there needed to be a high-capacity shuttle to get passengers easily onto the metro network in the city. The idea came after Nomishavn's Minister of Transport at the time had an official visit to Tokyo in the 1970s, at the time that the cruise terminal was still being planned. He was then shown around their various transit systems, and among them the recently opened Shonan monorail. He was fascinated by this technology, and when the new cruise terminal in Nomishavn was being built, he contacted Mitsubishi to build a suspended monorail as a shuttle service. They built the line and station and also provided a rolling stock for the service, and they still import rolling stock from Japan for this line. The current rolling stock went into service in the late 1980s and is set to be replaced in the coming years. This monorail shuttle has two bidirectional tracks, which just runs back and forth between the cruise terminal and the metro station without any switching of tracks. A service pattern similar to the one of the 42nd Street shuttle in New York City. For both of the stations, I wanted to go for a look which would have been very modern when it was built in the 1980s. So I used large windows along the walls and some smooth colored concrete roofs and walls on the back, and some metal parts also. You'll see when I build it. It also made sense for the stations to have platform screen doors, as a system which was built in the 1980s. This will really be like the last detail that will make it look really modern. I got some platform screen door assets from the workshop and I lined them up with the doors of the monorail trains once it stopped at the stations. And then I convert all of them into procedural objects so that I can adjust them to fit perfectly within the station. to try getting these walkways functional, so I put some elevated parts inside them and connected them down to where the cruise ships will stop. Hopefully some sims will use them if it's practical. cruise terminal and monorail shuttle finished, I still have some empty areas left right by the cruise terminal that I want to build out a little. It will be mostly light industrial, but also with some use for the police. You can see I'm building a small police station here. And because it's by the port, this will also be where the police boats by the city are stationed. And this police department is in charge of them. The department will therefore be in charge of any crime taking place around the port area, but also out in the waters within the borders of Nomishavn. For the rest of this area, it will be just a bunch of smaller factories which falls under light industrial use, meaning a bunch of different manufacturing. There's also some self-storage warehouses and some parking garages. Between the parking garage and police station, I built a small gas station which also has some charging stations for electric cars. Because I ran out of ideas of what to put there, I placed down the abandoned factory asset right next to the parking garage. I imagine it's one of the few abandoned factories that hasn't been demolished for something else to develop in this place. Maybe I'll come back to this area to build something else at a later point, but for now I'll just leave this here. The very last thing of the episode will be building out a canal cutting through the district of Malmö. I built some barge harbors last episode, which still isn't functional, but I'm doing something with that now. The canal was built sometime in the middle of the 1850s to make it easier for ships to navigate into Nomishavn with cargo. It was more heavily used earlier when Björkven was still the main harbor of the city for cargo, but it's still used today for smaller barge ships to take cargo from the larger ships coming in. After digging out the canal, I draw out a ferry line and connect them up so that the barges can sail through here.
What I had to give.
Anyways, that is it for this episode. It was an absolutely massive build these last 2 episodes, but I'm really happy with the result. I think for an important port city as Nomishavn is supposed to be, this was really important. As always, a like, comment and subscribe would be greatly appreciated and help me growing the channel. I also do have a Patreon in case you would wish to support me further. Have a great rest of your day, hope to see you in the next one, and stay tuned for some cinematics of the port of Nomishavn.
In the heart of Scandinavia, by the northern sea, lies a port so grand and ancient, where history runs free. Nomishavn, a city old, with wooden houses fair, cobblestones beneath our feet, and harbors rich and rare. Oh, Nomishavn, where past and present meet, with bustling markets, lively bars and music in the street. From old town charm to skyscrapers so tall, in Nomishavn there's magic for us all. The markets hum with vibrant life, where traders shout their wares. Fresh fish and Nordic crafts abound, the spirit of the fairs. And cozy bars and nightclubs bright, the night is always young, with laughter, dance and songs of joy, our hearts are warmly sung. Oh, Nomishavn, where past and present meet, with bustling markets, lively bars and music in the street. From old town charm to skyscrapers so tall, in Nomishavn there's magic for us all. Exceptional restaurants, with flavors rich and fine, from seafood fresh to Nordic feasts, a culinary shrine. By day the city's modern face, with trains that smoothly glide through parks and woods, where nature's grace and urban worlds collide. Oh, Nomishavn, where past and present meet, with bustling markets, lively bars and music in the street. From old town charm to skyscrapers so tall, in Nomishavn there's magic for us all. The old town tells its stories of sailors and of kings, with every creak of wooden beams, the past within us sings. Yeah, just beyond the skyline soars, where future dreams take flight. In Nomishavn, the old and new dance together day and night. Oh, Nomishavn, where past and present meet, with bustling markets, lively bars and music in the street. From old town charm to skyscrapers so tall, in Nomishavn there's magic for us all. Surrounded by the beauty of forests deep and wide, the fjords and fields of Nomishavn, where peace and wine